Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to Overwatch Central. So I'm still ill as I introduced the start of this video. iostux is a friend of ours. He is a private coach, has coached hundreds of people and done thousands of coaching sessions on improving at Overwatch. So with Season 8 coming out, a lot of people coming back to the game with a new lease of life because of the performance-based SR change has been scrapped for Diamond and above. I figured now was a good opportunity to do a big mega guide on how to improve from a coach's perspective. In the background is some gameplay from one of iostux's coaches, so if you do spot any advice that you can give this person, by all means put it in the comments, but do keep it polite. It does take a lot of courage to put yourself out there like Maximus has with this gameplay, so do bear that in mind. But let's get into it. Alright, so who are you and why should people listen to what you have to say about improving at Overwatch?
My name is iostux. I'm a private coach for over a year now, and I've been working with players from every skill tier. I've coached people in the top 100. I've coached people, you know, at skill ratings that don't even show in game anymore. And I feel that all of that experience has made me qualified to talk about some things that might help, you know, some of your viewers.
Is there any like main thing that you want to go over right at the start of this video for Season 8? It's a good opportunity for, I think, people to get back into the game and to start improving, but often it can be quite difficult for people to find out where to even begin. I guess the first one is selecting a hero, but you like to make sure that you have one of each role at least.
You can have one of each role, but usually covering 2 roles is already enough. Obviously, just to be safe, having one of every role is recommended. It's really important that people don't focus too much on like making their hero pool insanely large, because while it is true that one-tricking isn't great, trying to spread yourself too thin and becoming a jack of all trades isn't really recommended either. I usually recommend focusing on around 3 to 4 different characters. That's kind of the sweet spot between, you know, maximizing your improvement on those few characters without seeming inflexible once you actually go in game.
And I guess that kind of goes on nicely to being in those situations. There's certain heroes in the meta currently that you feel that you have to play, I suppose. So what do you do if you have somebody that's saying I want to play more Moira or more Zen, but their main problem is the team's always especially pressuring them to play Mercy? Like, do you stick to your guns there? Do you try and see the bigger picture? Because the main thing is, it doesn't matter what rank you go or whether you lose that match in particular. It's more improving at a certain hero, and you're not improving at that hero if you're spending more time playing Mercy.
I usually follow the mindset of just try to become so good that your personal skill outweighs the lack of a Mercy, and the only way to become better at your characters is by actively playing them. So especially for players in lower ranks, I think it's much better to just invest your time in characters that you really enjoy playing and just becoming so good at them and practicing them so deliberately that you're just going to be good enough to you know, play without a Mercy. Just imagine a higher ranked player, a top 500 player getting on a Smurf account in like gold. He is so good at the game that the enemy team having a Mercy and his team not having a Mercy won't really make a difference. He'll still have a pretty easy time winning games, and you know, the reason he became so good is by practicing the heroes that he wanted.
We actually do have a couple of questions from Twitter. One from Duncan GDA, who says, I'm best at DPS, Soldier, Pharah, Reaper by far, but all the way through comp he's having to play Winston, Reinhardt, Mercy, etc. because we always have 4 DPS, then I find myself stuck like lower ranks. What can you do in that situation? Do you just insta-pick the hero that you want to play? Do you run with 5 DPS? Like, how should you really go about that?
Okay, so you obviously need to find the middle spot of having a somewhat decent team comp, but you don't necessarily need to have a 2-2-2. So usually what I recommend is, as long as you have 1 support and 1 tank, your team comp is more than good enough. So playing 4 DPS, you know, having 4 DPS mains on a team can actually be really, really strong. And especially at lower ratings, just putting people on characters that they're comfortable on can make a huge difference. So I would say that as long as you have at least 1 support and 1 tank, you really shouldn't worry too much about getting a 2-2-2 and just play the character that you're strongest at.
Do you think this is something that people focus on too much? Like team comps?
It is important to focus on team comp, but I think this is kind of a controversial opinion where, you know, some players think all about the teamwork and they really want to have the perfect comp, and then other players like me think that, you know, that you shouldn't rely so much on your team and that you should find ways to win without having to rely on the meta. And I think that there's this sweet spot in the middle. where you can focus on your own improvement without, you know, making your teammates mad or decreasing your chances of winning too much.
Yeah. This goes on nicely to a question I've just seen by Whoops as well, with how can a support/tank main feel more involved with the game? Feels that it mostly depends on the DPS in them. And that's kind of what you said about making sure that you're focusing on your own game and stuff. It's quite straightforward for DPS, right? You just get kills, try not to die, but for tanks especially, if somebody plays a lot of Winston, this has been a problem that I've had, is just, what am I trying to do? What's my role? Am I peeling for people? Am I going after the Widowmaker? People try to do too much almost with some of these roles.
So the first thing that I need to mention is that it's kind of a common misconception that DPS is the only carry role. Overwatch is a game that's designed in a way where even support and tank players can have a very, very large impact, because that's just, you know, an enjoyable thing to do, and Blizzard wants you to enjoy the game, even if you don't decide to play a DPS character. And characters like Zenyatta, for example, aren't really considered, you know, supports in the traditional sense. Most people just call them, you know, DPS that can heal. So if you're playing a support or a tank, you can definitely carry. Obviously not as hard as a Genji or a Tracer, but if you're in a certain rating, you know, saying that it's because you're playing tank is usually a pretty bad excuse. Now, as a tank in general, it's your role to just create space, and space is basically any area on the map that you or your teammates can stand in relatively safely. So that's kind of your main priority. And you want to stall the enemies from building their ult charge. Every bit of damage that they deal into one of your shields is, you know, damage that they aren't really, that's not counting towards their ult charge, and that way you can, you know, buy your team time to eventually build an advantage. And support players, on the other hand, they also have a very similar role, where it's really about keeping their teammates alive, because dead teammates can farm ult charge, or supporting them in other ways with the damage boost or a discard orb to allow them to charge even more ult charge. So supports obviously can't make, you know, can't turn a really, really bad player into a really good player, but they can turn good players into great players. And I think that people don't really realize that, and they're always looking for ways to take matters into their own hands. But learning how to get carried is something that people should put some more thought in, because there are a lot of players out there on the ladder that just need a little bit more support by their teammates, and they could actually do a lot. And there's no shame in saying that, you know, you relied on the help of your teammates to reach a certain rating, because that's essentially what, you know, Overwatch is all about. You always rely on your teammates to some degree, and in the end, especially now with the removal of performance-based SR for Diamond and above, and hopefully soon for lower ranked players as well, really just focusing on supporting your team, if you realize that they are just, you know, in it to carry, can lead to really, really good results. And it's important to get rid of that pride and rid of that sense that you need to carry games in order to earn your rating.
Yeah, and I think what you said about different roles as well, especially supports and tanks, Winston as well, it's not necessarily about carrying yourself, it's more making sure that none of the enemy team can carry. And I think that's quite an interesting way of like going on it. Could you like elaborate some on that,
so,
like why you think that's important?
So for example, especially with, let's say you're a tank player, let's say you're a Winston player. Winston can't kill the entire enemy team. He's not really good at creating numbers advantages, right? So you won't see a Winston turning a 6v6 into a 6v4. However, the enemy team might have that really, really good Genji player who's trying to create an advantage for his own team. He wants to create, you know, turn it into a 4v6 for you. So what you can do is you can shut down that Genji. You can realize what this Genji's plan is, and that he's clearly the strongest player on the enemy team. And you can stop him, or at least stall him, because even the worst players, even if you get the worst players on your team, if you buy them enough time, eventually they will get a kill. Eventually they will get a pick. So you can't really carry yourself, but you can make it as easy for your teammates to carry as possible by just shutting down key enemy targets, you know, looking at who's actually carrying on the enemy team, and then looking at your own character and how you can stop that character from doing his job.
So I've got a question here as well from Twitter, which is from Partytime Gaming, which is how to maintain focus for an entire match. This can be really difficult, especially when stuff starts to go south. You might start getting tilted. How can you make sure that you're in the prime concentration sort of area?
The higher a player gets in terms of skill, the more he can multitask, the more he can focus on multiple things happening around him. A lower ranked player can really struggle with focusing on the kill feed, tracking ult charge, his positioning, and all of these things. And that can really overwhelm him and kind of lose focus because there's too much to focus on. And really the only fix is to look at yourself, to do what you're used to watch videos, to find something that is a weakness. Okay, so for example, maybe you're playing Ana and you've gone over your gameplay and you've compared it with other people's gameplay, and you started to notice that your grenades, that you use them on teammates very often instead of on the enemy team. So the next time you go into a game, you try to deliberately practice that. You try to only focus on that thing, and if before you even join into the game, come in with the idea of focusing on one specific thing. That's a lot easier for your brain to manage, and it's a lot easier to keep focus on one thing, and it'll stop you from derailing and focusing on everything that's going on around you. So yes, I would say try to find one specific thing that you want to improve on, because a lot of people want to try and improve at everything at once, but if you try to improve at everything at once, in the end you'll really not improve at anything. So just take it slow and take it one step at a time.
Have you got any good examples of that, or any like successful things that you've managed to break down with certain heroes? Because like sometimes it can be just try and die less. That could be like a good sort of way to start it.
It's not just so dying less, yes, but the important thing is that you need to understand the things that you actually want to improve on. So you can't just look at your statistics and say, oh, I'm dying too often, and then tell yourself the next time I go into a game, I'm going to try less. You need to actually understand that weakness. So in the example of positioning that you just gave, you need to understand why you are dying. So if I can give an example, maybe you're dying because you're standing too far out in the open, which means that if a Widowmaker shows up, you don't have anything to hide behind. So maybe in the next game you go into, you notice, okay, so this is the main reason that I die. If I try to stay, less out in the open, if I try to hide next to buildings or objects or behind teammates more, then, I can essentially eliminate all of these deaths that I've been getting for this reason. And as you do that over and over again, eventually it'll become second nature. Getting better at the game it's not really about really getting better, but the more you practice, the easier the game becomes for you, and eventually you'll be able to think of these things just second nature. They'll come to you automatically. Or with ultimate usage, maybe you notice that you're using your ultimates a little bit too early in the fight. Okay, so you can just try to use them a lot later and see what you can get away with. And it's really important to always experiment. And obviously these experiments aren't always going to go well. Sometimes they're going wrong and stuff isn't working out as planned, and you might even lose a bit of skill rating for it, but it's still important information for you. You know that thing doesn't work, so that you can move on and try something else instead of just sticking with one playstyle all the time.
What do you think the major mistake is that you see coming out of a lot of players across all of the heroes and all of the things that you've done?
That's hard to say, because general advice is generally so general that it doesn't really benefit the individual player that much anymore. I think the biggest mistake is that most players are looking for quick answers and quick solutions to their problems. But if there would be one solution, let's take aim for example. A lot of people are investing a lot of time in looking for this one thing that they need to change in order to aim like professional players. And that doesn't really lead anywhere, because if something like that would exist, if there's something that is very easy to implement that would have very, very drastic effects on your aim, then that would spread like wildfire. It would be all over, social media. Everyone would talk about it, and there's no way that you would miss it. But it's not. There is no secret magic trick that everyone is talking about. And that should already tell you that, these very general tips don't really exist. So the best thing you can do is to find advice specific to you. Just you can record one of your clips, you can look at specific situations in your games, and then just ask someone. You can, for example, go to higher level players on Twitch. You can just ask them, hey, I was in this situation on the second point of Gibraltar where the enemies had a Widowmaker on the dropship and I was playing Tracer. What was I supposed to do? And you'll get really, really good answers usually. And using those answers and asking more and more questions and getting more answers, eventually you'll start forming this picture of how to actually play the game, and you'll be able to answer your questions yourself in the future. There's no general advice that's going to really help you that much, and you shouldn't waste your time looking for it. You should really try to find something that is applicable to you specifically.
Yep. So let's say a player has picked a hero that they want to play a little bit more and that kind of thing. how would you want them to approach a game? Like, what resources would you like them to maybe pick up and stuff? Like, how does one player prepare themselves for changing the way that they play? If they're going in to improve on a specific hero and to change up certain things, it's a little bit different to just jumping into a game and just trying to win. Like, how do you make sure that you go into the right mindset and make sure that you remember what exactly your end goal is here, I guess?
Okay, first of all, you need to make sure that your expectations aren't set. So playing to improve and playing to climb are two completely different things. And if you try and you play to improve, you are going to see, especially at the start, that you're going to perform a little worse because you're no longer sticking with what worked before. You're trying out new things now. And while most people just consider that a setback, they think something went wrong, and then they go back to what worked with them before. But if you actually push through, and if you realize, okay, this is just temporary, I'm actually on the right path, you can improve so much. You can try out new things. You can fix your mistakes, and eventually you'll get back to the level that you were before. But this time, because you're focusing on improving instead of just climbing, you can go even past that point. So I guess don't try to focus on short-term results. Okay, always try to think about the long term. Always try to think about what's going to get you farthest, a few weeks or a few months from now. And I think that's a much healthier mindset to have.
And sort of to finish on then, any golden tip that you can think of that would not even benefit people in game, but just maybe having that approach, that analytical side to look at your own gameplay, work out the problems and to fix it, because that's quite a big challenge that not a lot of people have really the ability to do, is to self-evaluate a lot of the time. And also, where can people find more from you, both in terms of content but also for coaching as well? Okay,
so let me answer the first question first. So in general, people have already done the work for you. There are resources on Reddit, there are VOD reviews on YouTube, and most importantly, there are a lot of streamers at the moment, especially Overwatch League players that stream their solo queue games. And while not everything they do is applicable to you, you can kind of get some inspiration. You can look at what they do, and you can then directly compare that to what you're doing. So yes, make sure that instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, just look at what other people are doing, and you can skip a lot of steps and you can catch up rather quickly with enough practice. And you shouldn't really worry too much about discovering new things until you actually reach that top level of play. And yeah, if you're interested in some of the stuff that I do videos on different topics that I think could help players and kind of shift their perspective. And I also recently started doing some Overwatch League analysis, which are pretty in depth. So if you're interested in that, you can visit my channel.
A little bit.
iostux.
A little bit in depth.
Yeah, you can visit my channel, iostux Coaching. And if you're interested in some coaching yourself, if you think that you just don't want to spend the time doing your own VOD reviews, then you can always go to iostux.com and send me a message.
And that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. You can check out all of iostux's details in the description below. Let us know if you have any more questions for him in the comments below. And until next time, take care. We'll see you then.